What is up, guys? My name is Jason Whan, and in this video we're going to be talking about the art of listening. So from an early age we've been taught how to speak, read and write in school. But what about listening? So rarely have we been taught how to listen effectively, and this causes a lot of problems when we're trying to communicate with and understand each other. You see, when one person is talking, there is another person listening, supposedly, right? And it doesn't really matter how good a person is at speaking. If the person listening cannot listen effectively, the person speaking will be unable to properly convey his idea. And, just the other day I was having a conversation with a very good friend of mine, and he's in Australia, and he recently met this Vietnamese girl, and now he's dating her, and he was telling me about how things were going with her and the things that they had been doing. And anyways, he said he said to me, we had our first date yesterday and she pushed the date back by 30 minutes. Then she showed up late after she had already pushed it back. And as I heard this, I immediately just felt this urge to rush in and fix things. I had this compulsion to start telling him that he's getting jerked around, this girl is being flaky, and he better start paying attention, because otherwise things are gonna not be good, right? And yeah, I just had this really big compulsion to go in and fix things, and yeah, that was what I did. So I interrupted him and I started giving him a whole bunch of unsolicited advice. I was saying like, this girl's jerking around, the date did not go well, in essence I was evaluating him, I was judging him, and it just didn't create an environment where he could really tell me what was going on, and he was kind of put off by it. And yeah, immediately I could sense from his body language that he wasn't really happy about me inserting my opinions and advice into the conversation. And yeah, his body language just showed to me that he wasn't happy. His head went backwards, right? His chin tucked into his chin tucked in, his mouth, he pursed his lips, and yeah, it was just, his body language could tell me that he really wasn't really happy about my advice. And anyways, as I continued to listen to him, I realized that actually the date went pretty good, and that I had jumped to conclusions, right? I didn't understand the entire picture. Turns out during the date, the girl had so much to talk about, and she was actually really enthusiastic the whole time, and she did 80% of the talking. And all my friend did was that he just asked questions and listened to her the whole time. And yeah, that's the thing with women, they really love to talk, especially if they're really interested in you. They'll make it really easy for you, and they'll talk for the majority of the date. So yeah, if a woman, if you're going out with a woman, you're on a date with her, and she seems really closed off, and she's kind of just giving you really, lame responses, like one sentence responses, closed in responses, then, it just means that she's not really interested, and yeah, her interest levels are pretty low. The other thing is that a lot of guys will do, a lot of talking during dates. A lot of guys will maybe do 80% of the talking during dates, and they think that talking a lot will raise a woman's interest levels, but it actually does the opposite. Because first, if you're the guy and you're talking during the majority of the day, well, it kind of gives off the impression that you're sort of trying to impress her. A lot of guys will talk so much, they'll be like, I'm earning 6 figures a year, and I've got a private jet, and I'm gonna I fly over to Hawaii every year, and I go surfing, and they kind of flex. And to women, it just seems like you're trying to sort of hide something. You're trying to hide underlying insecurities, and you need to sort of talk a lot to make up for it. In a sense, you're trying to hide something, and so that doesn't really raise a woman's interest levels for you, because she can't exactly trust you, but she can't put a finger on it, but she feels like something's off. As opposed to the guy who doesn't really do that much talking, who's kind of quiet, who's kind of mysterious, right? So, you as a guy, you're just sitting there listening to the woman talking, and she's opened up to you, she's told you all these things about her, but yet she literally knows not so much about you, and so you're kind of a mystery to her. And yeah, that makes her really interested, right? She's like, what is this guy all about? He's so mysterious, he's so sort of like introverted in a sense, but that seems like this guy is trustworthy, he's confident, he's centered, right? Because that's the thing, like a lot of people who talk too much, they don't actually, their actions don't actually reflect what they say, right? They talk a lot, but they don't walk their talk. But opposed to people who don't talk that much, who's kind of quiet, who's kind of reserved, who don't talk too much, they're the people who are actually, they have integrity, they have an action bias, right? They don't go around talking and, blowing up sunshine up people's asses, right? They don't do that. And that actually makes them seem more trustworthy and reliable. Yeah. So anyways, so my friend did exactly the right thing by, letting his date talk for the majority of the time. It, raised her interest levels, it opened her up, and she really felt heard and understood. And yeah, as the date went on, she became more and more affectionate with him, and, it was reflected by her body language. She'd be more touchy with him, she would, be closer to him, and yeah, it was just really good signs. So yeah, it actually turned out that the date did go quite well, and it just happened that I didn't completely listen to my friend, and I didn't understand the entire picture, right? So that was something I had to work on. Before I had even fully understood his situation, I decided to give him advice. But you see, my advice wasn't solicited, and it wasn't effective because I was only seeing one side of the story. And so my advice only caused frustration and annoyance for my friend, because my advice it wasn't effective, right? It didn't apply to the other side of the story. And in fact, I realize now that giving people unsolicited advice is actually quite disrespectful and rude, right? Because you're sort of interjecting your advice into the conversation. And so you must diagnose before you prescribe, right? Imagine how silly it would be for a doctor to give his patient a prescription before a proper diagnosis has even been made, right? And I'm not telling you to go around thinking that people you listen to are patients, but what I'm saying is you must understand the entire situation before you give any sort of quality, effective advice. You could have all the best advice in the world. You could be, I don't know, the smartest person in the world, but if your advice doesn't apply, it wouldn't amount to a hill of beans. So the first step is to listen with the intent to fully understand the other person, and not with the intent to reply. And yeah, I only fully became aware of this problematic habit of mine when my friend said to me one day, I always feel like I'm getting judged when I share with you things about my life. And yeah, his statement hit pretty hard, but it woke me up. And yeah, it was true. I was always evaluating him, and I was always sort of judging him when he was telling me about his life. And in fact, all he wanted to do was to share with me the things going on in his life. He didn't want any advice, because he was a self-reliant individual who could solve his own problems, right? He didn't need my advice. And so basically I've learned now that before I give anyone advice, I always first ask for permission. So, as I'm listening, I say to the other person, hey, would you want my opinion on the situation? And if the other person agrees, then, now they're open to my advice, and now my advice is solicited and it's no longer unsolicited. And, I only typically say this after, the person I'm listening to has pretty much run out of things to say, and I've got a very good understanding of the entire situation, and there's pretty much nothing left to hurt. And then when I give my advice, the advice is, the person that I'm giving the advice to happily accepts my advice and uses it because it's applicable and I've understood his entire situation, and so it actually applies. Yeah. So yeah, that's it for this video, and thank you guys for listening.